Hey, welcome to this episode of our show, True DataOps. I'm your host, Kent Graziano, the Data Warrior. In each episode, we try to bring you a podcast covering all things data ops with people that are making data ops happen today. If you've not yet done so, please be sure to go look up and subscribe to DataOps.live's YouTube channel, because that's where you're going to find the recordings for all of our past episodes. If you missed any of the prior episodes, you can go catch up there. Better yet, if you go to truedataops.org, you can subscribe to this podcast and get proactive notifications about our upcoming episodes. Now, my guest today is the author of How to Succeed with Agile Business Intelligence. He's a consultant and a self-proclaimed BI artist, Raphael Rager. Welcome, Raphael. Glad to have you here today.
Hi, Ken. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So, why don't you give our audience a little bit about your background in data management and your journey with Agile BI?
Exactly, sure. I'm in the data space, I would say, since more than 20 years. I started as 19 years old reports developer with back then with Crystal reports. Moved on then more into the BI platform engineering, and from there into, let's say, BI requirements. And especially this topic about BI specific requirements led me to Agile BI, because I always felt that somehow people are struggling formulating clear requirements, and that they, if they, let's say, just write down the requirements on paper without seeing the data very quickly, often they already have changed their mind until we implemented the solution. And yeah, now today I'm working mostly as an Agile BI coach on one end, and from a technical perspective as a solution architect.
Okay, yeah, and I was just going to ask you what you do there at IT Logic. So that's you're a consultant and Agile BI
Exactly.
coach, which is good. There's not a lot of folks who know how to do that. Well, my experiences in trying to implement Agile in the data warehousing and BI space has been was challenging for sure. Back when I first started doing it about 20 years ago,
Mm,
discovered very quickly that an experienced Scrum Master couldn't necessarily help a Agile data warehousing team
right.
because they didn't understand the roles and the different skill sets that are in a data warehousing and a BI team compared to,
Mhm.
say, somebody developing an app with Java, right? And
Yeah.
you've got a team of 10 Java developers, and you can
Mm,
interchange them for whatever task needs to be done, and you just can't do that with most data warehousing and BI teams.
absolutely. Yeah. No, I
Uh,
think that's an important aspect. That's why I'm emphasizing like BI specific requirements or Agile BI. You cannot simply copy or apply a practice which works in software engineering and think that it's working in exactly the same way in a BI or data centric area. But still, you can of course adapt. This was basically what led to writing the book, where I tried to, let's say, bring all this experience together. And just to make that sure, I'm continuously learning. So the book was just an intermediate state, and already having, let's say, a few points here and there, I say, okay, next time I will add this and this topic or chapter, because I'm already learned quite a few new things during the past even week.
yeah, because I'll say at the high level, when you look at the Agile Manifesto and the
Mhm.
principles of Agile, the concepts are there, but when you
Sure.
get down to the practical
Yeah.
implementation aspects, there is quite a bit of difference between
Yeah.
developing, I'll say like a SaaS software solution
Mhm.
versus an integrated data warehouse
Mhm.
and BI applications. Even though, yeah, it is all technically software,
Mhm.
but it's a very different
Yeah.
mindset and approach that's
Yeah.
necessary in order to be successful with that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, as you mentioned, users changing their minds, and that was always one of the challenges with building a data warehouse. That if you started off with a set of questions that you got from the users, and you designed a
Mhm.
schema specifically to answer those questions.
Yeah.
By the time you delivered it, there were more questions, and your schema couldn't answer
Yeah.
it because things
Got it.
had changed.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's the whole, sometimes the users don't know what questions they want to ask until they
Mhm.
actually see the data.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where what led me down the data vault path years ago was that having a data vault underpinning it, which was really kind of, I'll say, solution agnostic and source system
Mhm.
agnostic. Then
Yeah.
you could build your data marts on it
Yeah.
as things changed. It was a lot easier to evolve the BI interface aspect
Mhm.
of it, instead
Mhm.
of having to rebuild the entire data warehouse because, oh, wait a minute, we forgot this data for that we need for a dimension that we didn't
Mhm.
even know was there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So, as you know, data products has become, it's one of those hot industry buzzwords right now. So I wanted to get your take on that concept, and what does that mean? How do you think that applies in this data landscape we have, and in particular to your work with BI and Agile
Mhm.
BI?
Mhm. So, looking back, when talking about BI requirements, I am using this term of a data product since 10 years already, because I was always too lazy to repeat, okay, report, cockpit, ad hoc report, dashboard, whatever. So, even though it's now used in an even broader sense, like data interfaces or providing data as a product, I think, first of all, for me, data product means just the outcome or the visible or tangible the outcomes of a data platform, for example. And what I most likely, or the thing I like most in the case of a data product is really the analogy to a real product in the real world. Because I think people, especially from a business perspective, they often struggle understanding what does it actually takes to get data, let's say, being refined from a source system or the source where the data is somehow created, up and into a report or dashboard, you name it. And there I use, or let's say as well in the book, I continued this analogy of a data product to say, okay, if there is a product, we need a data production line, like in a real plant. And I think there as well, this concept of having a product fits perfectly in, because you have as well in a real plant. First of all, before when you start designing a new product, you don't use an assembly line already for the first piece, but that's kind of a prototype or just a pre-series of a product where you simply want to try whether this works in the end, where you can double check with pilot users whether they like it, whether it fulfills their expectations. And then another, let's say, stage comes in. If you want to, like a car manufacturer, put out, let's say, 5,000 vehicles a week, you can't fabricate every or produce every car individually. You need to, let's say, industrialize the production of it. And I think that's the same for data products. Some data products are ad hoc products in the beginning, but if you want to scale, then I think you, let's say, can apply similar principles like in a real plant to optimize your production process.
Yes. Have you read anything on the theory of constraints? Uh,
Sure.
okay, I was going to say, because when you said that, that just took me back to my very first Agile data warehousing effort in the early 2000s. Is
Hmm.
an Oracle DBA at a conference had recommended we read this book,
Hmm.
The Goal, which
Yeah.
I assume you read that, and that gave me that whole image of a production line and
Yeah.
eliminating bottlenecks in order to deliver. And it was before I ever read anything. I had barely read anything about
Hmm.
Scrum or anything back
Yeah.
then, and
Yeah.
found that metaphor really worked well with our team, and
Yeah.
we got so we would be able to really productionalize
Yeah.
the changes to the data warehouse based on user input and customer
Yeah.
input, and it proved to be very, very successful adopting that particular
Absolutely.
approach. And yeah, I don't think I hear enough people talking about that, and I think that's a great point to bring in, talking about data products. Like you said, treat it like, look what a physical product that
Mhm.
was built in a factory. How does that happen? And how does that how do you scale that? And your description is like, I think right on for what we should be thinking about as we try to, move into this concept in the data world. I'm glad to hear that you hit it 10 years ago. That's great.
And I mean,
before data mesh made it a popular
yeah,
term.
exactly. And I also mentioned theory of constraints in the book, because what you mentioned right in the beginning was like, okay, if you have the team with the 10 Java developers, you can distribute tasks pretty easily. And of course, it would be nice if we have data teams which are purely, let's say, not only cross-functional as a whole team, but that you have, as Scott Ambler calls it, a generalizing specialist. And this generalizing specialist, it would be the ideal. So somebody who can, let's say, work along the whole assembly line, let's say, gathering the requirements, gathering the source data, then do some kind of data modeling, data loading, data testing, even designing the report and hand over the final product to the consumer. So that's, of course, the ideal case, because you can reduce the, let's say, the overhead of handing over tasks from one, let's say, role or one guy to the other. But the reality still is pretty much different. So probably you have, let's say, in your team, a business analyst looking at the requirements first, then you talk to some technical guys. Oh, how could we connect to this and this data source? Then you have the data modeling guy, then you have the data visualization specialist, and maybe you have a tester. And now the big question is, how can we organize this, let's say, kind of specialized or oriented organization? And there, I think the idea of having kind of an assembly line is pretty straightforward or interesting for me. It was like a aha moment. Say, okay, if we, for example, establish continuous flow with a certain rhythm of handing over little increments from, okay, getting the data from the source, loading it somewhere else, doing some modeling, then handing it over to the next station. Even though it's not, let's say, the ideal world like we would love to have it with a generalizing specialist, it's still a very good way to organize the work within a team and being able to deliver, let's say, end-to-end increments, as I call it, within a very short amount of time, like days or weeks.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the keys that I ran into in learning more and more about Agile, is that people got hung up on this. We got to deliver something in 2 weeks, but I ran into teams that were not doing the end to end
Mm-hmm.
iteration. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, they were generating a lot of stuff every 2 weeks, but there was no solution, right? Because
Yeah.
they were like I literally had one customer that was so proud of themselves because they'd done, I don't know, uh, probably 22-week increments, and all they
Mm-hmm.
managed to do was populate stage tables.
Yeah.
Right? They hadn't even
Yeah.
started build. They were going to do data vault. They hadn't even started building the hubs and the links, and they were
Yeah.
so say, "Oh, we're agile." It's like, well, no, you're not really agile.
Yeah.
It's great that you're breaking it up this way, but you haven't actually delivered a
Oh,
solution. So I think that's important, that whole end to end, because an assembly line doesn't stop at the first station. You don't have,
exactly.
all the tires make it to station one and get put on the rims, and
Mm.
now you just have a stack of tires,
Yeah.
right, on rims, but there's
Yeah.
still no cars at the other end of the assembly
Yeah.
line. That's not that helpful unless
Yeah.
you are just a factory that's making tires.
Yeah.
But if you're making a car, yeah, that's not that helpful. Um,
And,
you
and I mean
mentioned
that.
Scott. You mentioned Scott Ambler, so I assume you're referring to his disciplined agile
Yes.
approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Because and just one word in terms of this topic about working, let's say, even though you work in 1 or 2 week iterations, just building, let's say, all the table or a lot of tables in the stage layer, etc. If you explain that to someone, even say the developer, it's simply more abstract if you just show them an architectural diagram. And then, of course, you can. I had so far, before I wrote the book, a lot of PowerPoint slides and architectural slides, etc. And somehow I couldn't get through with the message. Now, since I use even in a visual way the data production line analogy, I ask people, okay, we are now building the whole plant. So within our plant, we will have multiple production lines. Now, of course, we could decide, and the production line consists of several machines or workstations, etc. Now, of course, we could follow the approach to always build only the first machine for all the production lines in 2 weeks, for example, or 1 month's time frame. And then we continue with the next layer or next machine. And then, of course, people say, but that doesn't make sense because the production line isn't finished. So wouldn't it make more sense to have one production line finished as a whole and then let it run to already deliver value by delivering data products in, let's say, always speaking in this image language. And then they immediately understand it. And I think that's as well one way which is very helpful to explain a team, but as well stakeholders and architects around the team, that it's not only, as you said, it's not only about having a 2 weeks iteration plan. It's really having this pivotal mindset or idea that it's feasible to create an end-to-end increment in an amount of time. But as you as well said, it's quite tricky.
Yeah. And so, thinking about the, assembly line approach. So what's your perspective on DataOps processes and how that all fits into this picture?
So first of all, it's exactly when we're talking about building a plant and not just having the ad hoc or explorative analysis where I just do a little bit of Python code here or an Excel spreadsheet there. I think it's exactly DataOps is incorporating that we have this kind of institutionalized process. So, for example, that data testing is not just, let's say, being done by accident. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is, let's stick to the image of having the assembly line. It's not done with just building the assembly line. The assembly line itself doesn't provide any value. You need to run the assembly line. So you need to, let's say, let the data flow through the line on a daily basis or even a more real-time case to produce the, let's say, and meaning refreshing the data product, so providing new and more current data day by day or hour by hour. So if you go into a real plant, and I had the chance to do such visits with many of my customers, even though you don't need that many people to run such a production line nowadays because everything is automated, still you need some human beings looking here and there if something goes wrong, and then adjust a little bit here and there, or even just do some quality checks in between. And I think this is exactly the idea of having a data ops process, which does not only look about how a solution is being built, but as well how it is operated. And especially having data as our raw material, it's inherently dynamic. So every day, even though it's the same data interface, it's the same source system, data can change just very, very quickly. And then suddenly maybe something breaks or at least doesn't behave in an expected way. And I think combining development and operations, ideally within the same team, so that the people who build the solution also have to run it. I think that's a perfect fit.
And I think to a certain extent, you have to build things with the mindset that it has to be continuously operational.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So is that part of a disciplined agile approach then?
So disciplined agile, definitely. If I had a look at that when writing the book as well, definitely has let's say DevOps as a generic term where they describe it. And what one reason why we back maybe 10 years ago when we first met Scott Ambler, what we liked about disciplined agile was that it's not as prescriptive in a way that it says, okay, you only have an iteration-based approach. No, it says, okay, we have an iteration-based approach as one option, but there is another option like a flow-based approach. Or if it comes to a more explorative thing, especially when it's about prototyping, for example, then it's not about, let's say, having prototyping stories, which we check every 2 weeks. No, it's maybe having a 2-hour cycle where we constantly or multiple times a day change our opinion, try to experiment with different hypotheses, etc. And so that's basically what I personally like to have, let's say, some guidance in choosing the right option for the right or for the context I'm currently in.
Yeah. So, what do you think about the role of automation in all of this? And maybe it's AI-driven
Yeah,
automation in the near
exactly.
future, I assume.
Yeah. So for me, automation is really key. Because this is what I mentioned before. Even though the idea is clear, okay, let's build the whole production line and then move on to the next production line. It's quite challenging because, again, we do not just, let's say, build a piece of software. We have a multi-layered system, and especially we are not at the beginning of the, let's say, data creation process. We are always, with a BI system, we are always somehow part of an existing landscape, and we as well have things which we cannot control or influence directly. And doing, let's say, such an end-to-end increment within, let's say, 2 weeks or even just 1 week as an iteration length is really cumbersome. And if you really think about a bit more sophisticated data processing task, like maybe a little bit of historization here or delete detection, incremental loading, etc., depending on the requirements, of course. But if you would always, let's say, code everything on your own for every table you need, then of course, even though you do a very thin slice of requirement, I still would doubt that you really can do that in 1 week or 2 weeks. But, and that's the same, let's say, for manufacturing plants, they only can produce a significant output at a, let's say, constant quality level by automating processes. And this is exactly the same in DataOps or in Agile BI as a precondition to have short iterations. You should think about automating whatever you can. And in the book, we describe or we use another analogy besides the data production line. It's the Agile BI city. So we draw, or our marketeer had the idea of drawing a city map with different districts, which as well then reflect to a certain degree the chapters in the book. And one district we visit on this journey is central technology. And there we describe mostly just different categories of automation, like data warehouse automation or ETL or ELT automation, but as well data test automation, deployment automation, or as well known as CI/CD processes. And last but not least, and that's often forgotten, it's visualization automation. So even when creating a report or a visualization like charts and tables, you can apply basically a high degree of automating things and not, let's say, positioning every pixel individually.
So, do you think it's possible for organizations to actually deliver this kind of thing at scale if they're not adopting some sort of an agile data ops and automation approach to delivering?
I mean, first of all, I cannot prove that it's not possible, but based on my experience, I have never seen it. In contrast, when the trigger in my career when I was a rather still young consultant was a large waterfallish project, and in the team I was involved, I think the guys who wrote all the concepts, they wrote more than 9 months just the business concept and a technical concept and even a more detailed concept, etc. Then we implemented 12 months, etc. And literally, when the system went live after 3 months, the customer deleted the whole system because it didn't satisfy the business requirements anymore 24 months later. Management changed and they said, okay, let's do everything different now because whatever reason. But and the other thing, by the way, was like that as well, the IT operations team, which was separated and not being, let's say, the same guys as the developers, they simply said, hey, we cannot operate this. It's much more complex for us and the skill sets we have, etc. So I'm coming from this, let's say, bad experiences of trying to, let's say, have this kind of pseudo safety, like that we can describe everything, etc. And if we're talking about companies, but as well data at scale, you are just multiplying, maybe even exponentially multiplying the problems of having, let's say, data as a dynamic raw material, which can change immediately, or all the inconsistencies you have in your systems, etc. Because even the processes are not consistent in a largest company. And that's why I come to the conclusion the variability and the uncertainty you have in these environments are even bigger than in small ones, and therefore even more you have a need for an adaptive kind of a process where you have, let's say, as well this learning aspect in it, so that people can learn about the data they have at hand now, that they can learn about the requirements they have today, and then as well admit that, oh, the first version, how we initially thought what we need, was completely wrong, because now that we have seen a first result, we learned what we actually need. And it's just a pity if you have already spent all your project budget just to find that out, and not being able to, let's say, change the direction, even just slightly, into another direction. So from that point of view, I'm pretty much sure that you have a lot of advantages following an agile approach in this context.
Yeah. So let's shift just a little, talk about the 7 pillars of true data ops. I wanted to get your feedback on, is there one of those that you think is kind of critical to success in trying to do these things?
I mean, all of these 7 pillars are somehow important, but I think that if I have to choose one, it's definitely the automated data testing and monitoring. And I tell you why. Of course, you need let's say, the pillar, like let's say, getting this data somehow into your system, and maybe as well combining the data. So that's basic thing. But even if you think about pure, let's say, solutions now being built like with a tool like Power BI, you even don't need this for a small sized solution. But the most valuable asset you always have in a data-driven solution is the trust of end users in your data. Because if people don't trust the data they see in their report, it's very, let's say, the effect is very quick that they move away and go back to their own Excel spreadsheets. Not that the quality is necessarily better there, but at least they know themselves how bad the data is or where the flaws in the data are. Now, if we are providing data products, let's say, from this industrialized way, where as well we can, let's say, change to or adapt to changing requirements, we really want to make sure that whenever we change something, that existing assets or existing data products are not negatively influenced by
Right.
these changes. That's why I say, before you start even, let's say, think about buying a data warehouse automation solution, which is important, but rather start with getting a data test automation solution, because that's your safety net in the end, and make sure that you can deliver high quality from day one on, or at least make sure that you know that there is an issue in the data before your end users will find out.
Okay, good. So, wow, we're like at 29 minutes already. Wow.
Oh, time flew by. Gone
Time
through
flew
very
by.
quickly.
So, I guess I have to skip to see what's coming up next for you. Are you going to be speaking at any conferences or meetups
Yes.
in the next couple of months?
So for the spontaneous ones, tomorrow evening, I'm in Zurich for the TWI Bar Camp, or Data Analytics Bar Camp. So feel free to Google that and
That's
join
Zurich,
us. Branger,
Switzerland.
Yeah,
For
exactly. In Switzerland, Europe, not Sweden. And then, as an online event, I'll join Vasco Duarte, who is the publisher of our book as well, for the Product Owner Summit. Very big recommendation to that as well. And then later in June, I'll attend TWI Europe conference in Munich, hosting an Agile BI clinic where people can bring their own use cases and get some coaching from my two fellow Agile coaches, Jana Neser and Andrea Weichand, and myself.
Great. And then I see we've got your LinkedIn profile here. So people who want to connect with you and get more information about those, they can connect with you
Sure.
on LinkedIn and see what you're doing.
Yeah, it would be a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being my guest today, Raphael. This was a very interesting talk. Glad to find another somebody else who's studied the theory of constraints and applied that to
Yeah, that was
delivering data products. Now we're gonna say it was like, yeah,
surprise.
it was data products. It's product thinking.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everyone else for listening in today. I want to make sure that you join us again in 2 weeks. My guest will be the principal data strategist from Snowflake, Dr. Jennifer Bellicent. And as always, be sure to like the replays on today's show and tell your friends about the True Data Ops podcast. Don't forget to go to truedataops.org and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss these upcoming episodes. So until next time, this is Kent Graziano, the Data Warrior, signing off for now.